I was halfway through analyzing the quarterly sales metrics when Derek Monroe barged into my office like a storm in a bespoke suit. No knock, no hello, just a brash, calculated entrance meant to shake the ground beneath me. Classic. Derek. Diana, he barked, tossing a file onto my desk with theatrical flair. We need to talk. Now. I glanced at the folder, then at the man I'd reported to for the last 4 years. Derek Monroe, CEO of StratusCore Systems, poster boy for toxic charisma. He never acknowledged the women in this company unless he needed a coffee refill or a color-coded schedule for his golf weekends. He thrived on control. But more than that, he thrived on reminding everyone he had it. Still, I stayed calm. I always did. Of course, I replied coolly, motioning to the chair across from me. He didn't sit. Of course not. He preferred to loom, a towering silhouette of arrogance. The board's decided to restructure leadership, he declared. We're moving in a new direction, and frankly, we need people who lead. People with vision, not just someone who color codes spreadsheets. I blinked, stunned for half a second. You're firing me? His smirk said it all. The kind of grin men wear when they think they've just checkmated you. Let's not be dramatic. We're releasing you from your position, effective immediately. No warning, no performance review, and absolutely no recognition that my division had just posted the highest revenue growth in the last 3 years. Not a word. I see, I said quietly, my voice even controlled. May I ask why? He crossed his arms. You lack vision. You manage tasks, not people. And let's be honest, Diana, this industry requires strength, boldness, confidence, things you just haven't demonstrated. Oh, there it was. The not-so-subtle swipe, dressed up in leadership lingo, a dig at my gender cloaked in corporate doublespeak. I wasn't being let go for performance. I was being erased for not fitting his mold. Not loud enough, not arrogant enough. Not enough testosterone in the room. I understand, I said, voice calm but sharp, and that rattled him, his brow furrowed, thrown off by the absence of tears or raised tones. He expected a breakdown, maybe even begging, but I'd long since mastered the art of being unshakable in boardrooms built on ego. I'll need your badge and company laptop by end of day, he added. Your access will be shut down at 5 p.m. HR has your severance paperwork ready. I stood, extended my hand. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate the clarity. He hesitated, just long enough to feel my composure sting, then shook my hand. Good luck out there. As he left, satisfied with his coup, I sat back down. No trembling, no panic, just a slow exhale, because what Derek didn't know, what no one in that gleaming tower of glass and self-importance knew, was that I wasn't just a department head. 2 weeks ago, everything changed, and I'd been waiting for the right moment to act. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, my father beaming proudly at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of StratusCore's first regional office, the very company Derek had just tried to push me out of. I ran my fingertips along the silver edge of the frame. You told me to wait, Dad, I whispered. Until the time was right, I stood and began packing. I didn't take much. Just a few notebooks filled with ideas that never made it past Derek's ego, a ceramic mug my team gave me last Christmas, and that photo, outside, the office buzzed with its usual polite avoidance. A few coworkers glanced up, sympathy etched across their faces. Others couldn't meet my eyes. No one asked. But the questions hung in the air like smoke. Did she get fired? What did she do wrong? I walked out with a small smile. No tears, no drama, just sunlight on my face, and a weight lifted from my shoulders. 15 years of loyalty that had just been cast aside. But they hadn't ended my career. They'd lit the fuse. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to James Whitaker. It's time. Prepare everything. His reply came back seconds later. Understood. Shareholder meeting can be scheduled within 5 business days. I turned back and looked up at the tower, glass gleaming in the spring sun. Derek thought this chapter had closed, but the next time I stepped into that boardroom, it wouldn't be as an employee. It would be as their majority shareholder. And this time, my smile would be real. 2 weeks earlier, I had sat in James Whitaker's quiet wood-paneled law office on the Upper East Side, staring at an envelope I wasn't allowed to open until noon on my 30th birthday. My father had always loved theatrics. Serious things should feel significant, he used to say. Diana, James had said, handing me the envelope with a gentle, almost paternal look. Your father left very clear instructions. You are not to open this until exactly noon on your 30th birthday. Not a second before. I had smiled, mused and curious. What is this? A delayed birthday card. James's knowing grin didn't waver. Your father was a man of vision, and more importantly, he trusted you more than anyone. That sentence clung to me in the days that followed. Warm, steady, and quietly powerful. My father, founder and former CEO of StratusCore Systems, the very company that had just shown me the door without so much as a second glance, had always believed in preparation. Long before forecasts or projections, he believed in people, and more than anyone, he believed in me. When he passed away 5 years ago, the company shifted, not just in leadership, but in soul. It got colder, more mechanical. It stopped being about innovation and became obsessed with margin. That's when Derek Monroe arrived, MBA in hand, charisma polished to a blinding shine, and an ego large enough to fill every corner office on the 43rd floor. He charmed the board. He talked metrics. And brick by brick, he dismantled the culture my father had poured his life into. I stayed foolishly thinking I could protect what was left, that maybe from inside I could slow the erosion. But now I understood. My father had seen this coming, and he'd prepared for it in the most extraordinary way. On the morning of my 30th birthday, I sat alone in the reading nook of my Tribeca apartment, the exact spot where Dad used to sip coffee and skim the paper on Sunday mornings. The city buzzed beyond my window, but in that moment, time felt frozen. I opened the envelope, fingers trembling. Inside, a neatly folded letter and a thick document, sealed with an ornate gold-embossed crest. I opened the letter first. It was handwritten, my father's unmistakable script, elegant, deliberate. Diana, if you're reading this, it means you've turned 30, and that means you're ready. I never doubted it. Not once. I saw the late nights, the sacrifices, the integrity you showed even when no one was watching. I also saw how the company changed after I left. I feared this day might come, the day you'd need more than just a seat at the table. So I gave you the table. I stopped reading, blinked. My breath caught in my chest. Then slowly, I opened the next document. It was a notarized trust agreement, filed, sealed, legally, bulletproof. 90%. That's how much of StratusCore's shares had been transferred into my MAM, silently, securely, held in trust, until I turned 30. Effective immediately, I had full voting rights. Effective immediately, I controlled the company. I wasn't just a shareholder. I was the majority owner. I read the document 3 times. Then again, just to be sure this wasn't some fever dream. A mix of disbelief, adrenaline, and quiet, unshakable power surged through me. Power, measured, deliberate, and no longer theoretical. I grabbed my phone and called James Whitaker. Is this real? I managed to ask, voice shaking from 1,000 suppressed emotions. It's real, he replied gently. Your father built it to be ironclad. No public filings, no leaks. The board won't know unless you tell them. Why didn't he activate it sooner? Because he wanted you to decide. He wanted you to experience the company without that leverage, to see for yourself who people really are, to understand if it was something you truly wanted before you took it. That hit me hard, deeper than I expected. I'd spent years being talked over in meetings, watching Derek take credit for strategies I had quietly designed, watching men rise faster doing less while I kept my head down, working twice as hard for half the recognition. I'd thought time would eventually reward me, but time was never the issue. Leverage was. And now I had it. I scheduled a follow-up with James the next morning. Let's talk about what comes next. He didn't hesitate. We'll draft the notice for a special shareholders meeting. One item on the agenda, Executive leadership review and replacement. We'll notify the board once everything's finalized. No, I said. Not until I say so. There was a beat of silence. Diana, may I ask what you're planning? I looked out the window. Cars streamed past, strangers hurried through their lives. The world had no idea what was about to shift. I'm planning, I said, voice calm and cold, to walk into that boardroom and show them exactly who they tried to fire. I skipped the mandatory exit interview. HR called twice, then emailed. I ignored all of it. Instead, I sat in a quiet corner booth at Maple and Ash Cafe, sipping a lukewarm flat white, while James reviewed the final draft of the shareholder meeting notice. It was official now. On paper, I held 90% of the company's voting power, a legal and financial truth Derek Monroe could never have imagined. You sure you're ready? James asked, sliding the documents across the table. Because once we send this, Diana, it's going to blow the doors off that boardroom. I looked him square in the eye. My voice didn't shake. They pulled the pin the moment they fired me. He gave a small smile. Fair enough. The document itself was deceptively simple. Just one agenda item: leadership review and the appointment of new executive management. It would hit like a bomb. And that was the point. Derek's entire style was built on unchecked confidence. He bulldozed meetings with buzzwords, buried opposition in bravado, and coasted on favoritism from a boardroom full of aging men who liked how he commanded a room. They'd soon learn how fragile that illusion truly was. I'll serve the notice Friday morning, James added. That gives them 2 business days to scramble. I smiled. Perfect. That same afternoon, I paid a visit to Marla Kingsley, trustee of the shares since my father's passing. Her office, quiet, minimalist, immaculately organized, sat in a brownstone overlooking Central Park. I've watched that man dismantle your father's legacy brick by brick, she said flatly, sliding a thick folder across the polished oak desk. You don't owe him courtesy. Inside were the tools I'd need: ownership certificates, complete voting records, and, most damning of all, a detailed financial summary under Derek Monroe's tenure. Declining employee satisfaction, surging turnover, executive perk abuse, a suspicious plateau in revenue during a booming industry cycle. He's been masking the cracks with inflated projections, Marla said. If this continues, he'll crater the company in less than 2 years. I nodded. The numbers will speak for themselves. As I left her office, I passed the mural in the hallway, a striking oil painting of my father standing outside the original StratusCore office, one hand on the shoulder of a small girl in a red dress. Me. He'd built the company with vision, with soul. And though he was no longer here, I could still feel his presence, calm, steady, like a quiet hand on my shoulder. He looked younger in that painting than I ever remembered him being in real life. His hand rested gently on the shoulder of a little girl in a red dress. My father believed in people. He believed in legacy. And even though he was gone, standing in front of that mural, I could feel his hand on my shoulder like it never left. By the time Monday rolled around, the silence I'd left behind had turned into full-blown whispers and speculation. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from former coworkers. What happened? Did you quit? Derek's acting like nothing's wrong, but HR is tight-lipped. Whatever you did, I hope you're okay. I didn't answer. Not yet. The silence was part of the plan. Let Derek enjoy the illusion of control just a little longer. Let him puff out his chest and gloat in the mirror. Let him think he'd erased me. Let him underestimate me. One last time. That evening, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom, staring at the navy suit I'd never worn. Tailored, sleek, powerful without trying. It was the kind of suit you don't wear to ask for respect. You wear it to claim what's already yours. I rehearsed my words, not a speech, just a few lines. Sharp, poised, undeniable. The truth would do most of the talking. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of Manhattan morning that smelled like coffee and The sidewalks were buzzing. Traffic was relentless, and not a soul out there had any idea what was about to detonate inside StratusCore Tower. I arrived 10 minutes early. As I walked through the lobby, the receptionist glanced up and visibly froze. Her eyes widened. Lips parted like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She didn't stop me either. The elevator chimed softly. Upstairs, I could already see blurred shapes moving behind the frosted glass walls of the boardroom. The lights were on. The men were seated. James Whitaker was waiting near the elevator, his expression unreadable but steady. "They're inside," he said. "Derek's already talking. He thinks this is just another quarterly strategy session." "Not for long," I said, smoothing the front of my blazer. And then I walked forward. The boardroom door opened with a quiet but deliberate click. Heads turned. The room stilled mid-sentence. "And that's why I believe Q3. Derek's voice cut off mid-thought as his eyes landed on me. His brow lifted, confusion quickly flashing to irritation. "Diana," he said slowly, voice edged with condescension. "This meeting is for board members only." I smiled with flawless calm, then walked straight to the head of the table. I set down a folder of documents and took my seat. His seat, now mine. "Exactly," I said. The silence was deafening. Derek stared at me from across the long polished oak table, confusion melting into alarm. I watched the panic flicker behind his eyes as he scrambled to understand. He stood, jaw tightening. "This is a board meeting," he snapped. "Employees aren't permitted." I tilted my head ever so slightly. "I'm not here as an employee." I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm here as the majority shareholder." A seismic shift passed through the room. Chairs creaked as board members straightened. Eyes darted. Some leaned forward. Others froze, stunned. One of them, Charles Benton, a longtime member who'd worked with my father, looked down at the papers I'd slid across the table. He adjusted his glasses and gave me a long look. "Is this accurate?" he asked cautiously. "It is," I replied. 90% of the company's shares were placed in a trust under my name. Activated on my 30th birthday. All documentation is certified, notarized and filed in compliance with corporate governance. Derek's gaze swung to James, who was already calmly handing copies of the ownership certificates to the board secretary. No emotion, no theatrics. Just, "You can't be serious," Derek said, voice cracking with disbelief. "This is absurd. Why would your father?" "Because he trusted me," I said, cutting him off, my voice cool but strong. "And because he knew exactly what would happen to this company without proper oversight." The room tensed again. They knew. Oh, they knew. They just hadn't expected someone to say it out loud. Since my father's passing, Derek had infected the culture like a slow poison. Loyalty mattered more than skill. Flash over substance. Appearances over integrity. And the number, they were starting to show it. "Let's not waste any more time," I continued, opening the second folder. "As majority shareholder, I've called this special session to review the current executive leadership, specifically, the position of Chief Executive Officer." Derek's face turned crimson. He shot to his feet, fists clenched. "This is a coup, a personal vendetta. You think you can waltz in here and—" "I'm not asking, Derek," I said, letting my voice rise just enough to take back the room. "I'm exercising my rights." Then, slowly, I slid the company's internal performance report across the table. "Let's talk about numbers. No need for drama. The facts would do all the damage. Employee satisfaction, down 38% in the last 2 years. Turnover in critical departments, up 3 active discrimination claims under legal review. Revenue flat, despite a market surging with opportunity." I glanced at the men seated around the table. No one spoke, but they were listening now. I had compiled everything. Testimony from department heads, internal employee surveys, independent audits, and beyond the spreadsheets and signatures, I had gathered something more damning. Proof. I laid it out in front of the board. Misuse of company funds, unauthorized travel billed to corporate accounts, outrageous executive bonuses and manipulated investor briefings. I looked across the table at Derek Monroe. "All of it," I said steadily. "Signed off under your leadership." The board members leaned forward, flipping through the files with furrowed brows. Charles Benton, visibly disturbed, kept adjusting his glasses, his lips pressed in a tight line. The CFO, silent until now, leaned over to whisper something to the general counsel, who immediately started typing furiously on his tablet. Derek's jaw flexed, his fists clenched. "You're twisting this," he snapped, voice trembling with rage. "You're turning numbers into some petty revenge fantasy." I met his stare with ice. "I don't need to twist anything. I have evidence." I let that word hang in the air like a thunderclap. "You built your kingdom on the assumption that no one powerful enough would ever question you. That ends today." The boardroom sat in stunned silence. No one moved. No one interrupted. I reached into my folder one last time and pulled out a single document. "Effective immediately," I said. "I'm submitting a formal motion to remove Derek Monroe as Chief Executive Officer of StratusCore Systems." I paused. As majority shareholder, my vote is sufficient to carry the motion. The board secretary looked frozen. "Why, you don't need a second vote. I own 90%, I said simply. "A majority by every legal and logical definition." Charles Benton cleared his throat and spoke with quiet authority. "In accordance with our bylaws, the motion's removal is effective upon filing and documentation." The moment cracked. Derek slammed a hand against the polished oak. "You can't do this," he shouted. I didn't flinch. I already did. Security didn't need to be called. He didn't but the fury on his face, the disbelief, the sheer helplessness, was unforgettable. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked small. When the door clicked shut behind him, I took a long, steady breath and looked around the boardroom at the men who had once doubted me, ignored me, underestimated me. "This company deserves better," I said. "So do its people. And starting today, that's exactly what they're going to get." Charles gave a slow nod. A faint smile broke through his sternness. "Welcome back, Diana." By the end of that week, Derek Monroe's nameplate had vanished from the door of the executive suite. I didn't move into the office right away. I didn't need the symbolism. I didn't need the skyline view or the mahogany desk to prove I belonged. I had bigger work to do. The following Monday, I called an all-staff meeting. Everyone, from engineers to interns to custodians, we gathered in Innovation Hall, the same space where Derek once stood before a lead charts and gave hollow speeches about efficiency and market conquest. But this time, the energy felt different, tense, curious, hopeful. People filed in slowly. The front rows were empty. No one wanted to seem too eager. I saw suspicion in some eyes, weariness in others. They'd been burned before. I stood alone at the front. No slides, no script, just me and the truth. "Some of you know me," I began. "Some of you only know what you've been told." I took a breath. "But let me start here. I didn't come back to take power. I came back to restore trust." Heads tilted, eyebrows raised. People were listening. "For years this company thrived because of you. Your ideas, your late nights, your belief that what we were building actually mattered. Somewhere along the way, that got lost." I let the silence settle before continuing. "I was fired last week," I said with a soft, knowing smile. "Told I lacked leadership, that I wasn't what this company needed to move forward." There were a few nervous laughs. I saw jaws drop, but the atmosphere shifted. Their walls began to lower. I didn't fight back, not right away, because I knew something Derek didn't. Leadership isn't about volume or vanity. It's about vision, respect, and lifting up the people who actually make this company work. I scanned the crowd, locking eyes with engineers I used to stay late with, analysts who never got the credit, receptionists and assistants who were always overlooked. Starting today, that changes. And it did. For the next 2 weeks, I did something radical. I listened. I sat with every department head. I spoke with interns and janitors. I asked what wasn't working, what they needed, who deserved more than they were getting. And when they told me, I promoted Jasmine Lee from customer service to head of client experience, a role she had unofficially held for a year while her manager reaped all the credit. I called back Noah Reyes, a brilliant developer who had resigned after being repeatedly passed over for promotions in favor of louder, less capable men. I completely overhauled human capital division, I read every ignored complaint that had been collecting dust in forgotten folders, and I quietly let go of the managers who had built cultures of fear, bias, and favoritism. Then I brought my father's dream to life. The Elevate program, a company-wide initiative to reward innovation, celebrate collaboration, and promote equity, regardless of job title, background, or tenure. No more whisper networks. No more glass ceilings. Just good people doing great work, finally getting recognized. Late one night, I wandered the quiet halls of StratusCore alone. The office felt lighter, alive. Laughter drifted from the break room again. Desks had color, family photos, mugs, ferns. People were staying late because they believed again, not because they were afraid not to. And down one quiet hallway near the engineering bullpen, I paused by a whiteboard. Someone had scrawled it in blue marker, just beneath a row of sticky notes on the whiteboard near the engineering bullpen. She came back. 3 simple words, underlined twice. I stood there for a moment reading it over and over again. Not she took over. Not she fired Derek. Just, she came back. That meant more than any title I now held. More than the legal authority, the new seat at the table, or the nameplate waiting for me upstairs. Because that sent, it wasn't about revenge. It was about return. The following week, I finally moved into the CEO's office, not because I needed the corner suite or the sweeping skyline views, but because it was time. The nameplate on the door was simple, sleek, brushed steel, minimalist font. Diana Hastings, Chief Executive Officer. I didn't bring much with me, just a single framed photo, my father and me, taken on the company's opening day. He was smiling, so was I. There was so much hope in that picture. I placed it in the corner of the desk and sat down, not with a sense of conquest, but of continuation. This wasn't just my company now. It was my responsibility, and I intended to honor it. It had been exactly 1 year to the day. 12 months since I walked out of this building with a cardboard box and a polite smile, dismissed as not what the company needed. 12 months since Derek stripped me of my title, completely unaware that I held something infinitely more powerful, ownership. Now, standing once more in front of those same glass doors, wearing a tailored navy suit and carrying a sleek leather folder under my arm, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not vengeance, peace. I nodded to the front desk receptionist, who immediately rose when she saw me. "Good morning, Miss Hastings." "Diana, please," I said with a warm smile. "We're all on the same team." The elevators chimed softly as I ascended to the top floor. Once Derek's domain, now mine. But I hadn't changed the decor for theatrics. I kept the walnut desk, the panoramic windows, the soft leather chairs. What I did change were the walls. Gone were the ego-framed portraits of past executives. In their place, candid photos of our team, staff celebrations, product launches, client visits, employee-led initiatives, innovation sprints, led by names that had once been invisible. And behind my chair, centered on the far wall, hung a large portrait of my father, not as a monument, as a reminder. I sat down and opened my laptop. The quarterly report was waiting. Our strongest quarter in 5 years. Customer satisfaction, up 23%. Employee retention, up 41%. Revenue, breaking records. But what mattered more was how we did it. Collaboratively, transparently, ethically. People no longer whispered their concerns over hallway coffee. They spoke freely and were heard. Diversity in leadership had doubled. Feedback channels were active. Promotions were based on merit. We didn't just bring in great people, we gave them a place to thrive. A soft knock at the door. "Come." It was Jasmine, now head of client experience, with her usual spark, even behind her glasses. "You ready?" she asked. "They're waiting in the conference room." I stood, smoothing my blazer. "Let's do it." The boardroom felt different now. Not in layout, but in presence. For the first time in StratusCore's history, half the board were women. Many were under 40. They asked tougher questions. They brought new ideas. They made better decisions. At the center sat Richard Tanaka, our new strategic advisor, brilliant mind, grounded spirit, the kind of person my father would have trusted. Before we begin, Richard said, turning toward me, Diana has a few words. I hadn't prepared anything, but as I stood, every eye on me, not in judgment but in respect, I understood. This was the moment he had prepared me for. My father built this company on 3 values: I people, vision, integrity. I want to thank each of you for believing in change, for making hard choices when easier ones would have been safer, and for helping me rebuild something worth inheriting. I let the silence settle. Someone once told me I lacked leadership, I added with a small smile. But leadership isn't about volume, or title, or polished jargon. It's about vision, accountability, and the courage to do what's right, especially when it's inconvenient. I looked around at the board, the people shaping our future. I'm proud to say we're finally living up to those values again. There was a pause, then quiet applause. Not thunderous, just warm, real. That afternoon, I took the long way back to my office. Past every department, I high-fived marketing interns, celebrating their first big campaign. Shared coffee with a design lead I once worked late nights beside. Stopped to joke with Noah in product development, now leading a team of his own. In the break room, someone had brought cupcakes for an intern's last day. I took one, sat down among them. We didn't talk about anything important, and that was the point. This wasn't just a company anymore. It was a place where people belonged, and that, more than stock prices, or executive reshuffles, or revenge, that was the real legacy, and it was just getting started. This story reminds us that true power doesn't always come with a title. It comes with vision, patience, and knowing your worth even when others try to diminish it. Diana was dismissed, disrespected, and underestimated by a boss who thought he held all the control. But what he didn't know was that she had something far greater: legacy, leverage, and a quiet strength passed down by her late father. This isn't just a tale of corporate revenge. It's a story about standing tall when the world tries to shrink you. It's about honoring those who believed in us and choosing integrity over ego every single time. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own journey of being overlooked, undervalued, or pushed aside, then this channel is for you. Please like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear that their time is coming. And before you go, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your region or country in the comments below. Let's build a global community that uplifts, empowers, and remembers the quiet ones, often carry the biggest legacy.